Welcome to the Grit Daily Startup. I'm your host, Sebastian Rusk, and this is a podcast about what goes on behind the scenes at startups. The good, the bad, and the gritty. Let's dive in. Quique, welcome to the show.
Hey, nice to see you. I know they can't hear us, I know they can see us and only hear us, but happy to see you this morning.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to hang out with me and help me better understand exactly what you guys got going on over at Advisr. This show's all about the good, the bad, and the gritty of the startup world. We'll get into all that and what your experience has been and how it's been building Advisr and some of the good, bad, and gritty experiences that you've had as part of that process. But before we do that, let's back up a little bit and help our listeners better understand a little bit about you.
Yeah, sure. I'm currently in Bozeman, Montana, which is where I sort of spend most of my time in this COVID world. But most of my career has been spent in New York City, where I've been for the last 20 years. I started my career working for an enterprise technology company, servicing large media sales teams. Spent a couple of years there, moved to London with them, came back and worked for a big sort of broadcast television media company for a couple of years. And then after that, really moved into the digital environment, working for an organization that provided digital media capabilities, also to big media sales teams. And interestingly, sort of it was my experience across those organizations that really led to starting Advisr, which I'm happy to tell you about.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we observed, over the course of the last really 15 or 20 years was that the role of the salesperson, particularly in the media ecosystem, was changing. If you were a salesperson, 20 plus years ago and you worked for a television organization, you really had a pretty unique and exclusive set of products that you sold, right? If you were an advertiser and you wanted to be on, a TV station in Dallas, you had to call that TV station. What's changed is really through the proliferation of digital products. Sales organizations continue to sell their core product, but they also represent a number of, third-party capabilities and sometimes additional first-party capabilities. Those third-party capabilities, though, are largely available to, sales teams everywhere. So it led from the sales organization going from this world of having unique and exclusive products that were relatively limited to a huge number of products that they're expected to represent. And one of the challenges is you can only be good at selling so many products, right? And typically, salespeople gravitate towards the products that they're either most incentivized by, right, effectively the highest commission rate, or the products that they're most familiar and comfortable with. And what we have found is that a lot of times, sales organizations are leaving money on the table as a result of that. So we've seen them try and solve this problem a couple of different ways, right? They say we're going to train our sales team, right? We're going to throw a bunch of training at it, and that can work, but there's a lot of turnover with sellers. There's a lot of turnover with customers. So some of that institutional knowledge is lost. We've seen other sales organizations that will invest in their own proprietary technology. That's relatively limited to the top tier, right? The guys that have enough money to try and build their own tech. The challenge with that is that a lot of these organizations are not technology companies and, sort of by trade. So tend to not be as efficient at building and scaling and deploying tech. And then third is they throw a bunch of people at it, right? So they say, okay, we've got these sales teams, we've got these, big product portfolios. If we invest in sales support, right, the sales support can help these sellers navigate these, these complex product portfolios. But that's really expensive, right? As your revenue grows, you hire more salespeople. You have to invest in more sales support. So those are just a couple of examples of what companies have tried to do, because there really hasn't been a third-party technology solution on the market designed, to help address some of these challenges. And that really was the birth of Advisr, right? How do we help, build technology that's going to make it easy for sales organizations to effectively represent their capabilities and deliver value for their customers?
So how do you get away from the sale? You brought up a good point. Sales professionals want to sell things typically with the biggest sales commission. So what does your solution solve pertaining to that? Because if there's 100, like you said, the average, you and I were chatting before the interview, you said the average company has how many products available?
So across our customer set, the average is about 47 products. That's kind of like core product level. So if you think about the combinations or sort of features of products, right? There could be thousands of different, almost like SKU equivalents. But for us, it's about 47 products.
Right. So out of those 47 products, are all of them probably don't pay the same on here. So how did your solution help solve that problem of being able to get sales professionals to want to sell more than just 5?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And I think, it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg, right? Part of the reason that we think salespeople gravitate. Well, I mean, look, money is the obvious one, right? Where salespeople tend to be motivated by money, and as a result, they're going to sell the highest commission products. But at the same time, salespeople are smart, right? They want to deliver value for their customers because they know that's how they're going to maximize their income over the long haul, right? If you sell the wrong product to a client, the likelihood of them sort of re-engaging on the next time they want to spend money is pretty low,
sure.
Right? So in the absence of the resources to efficiently build the right solution for their customers, sometimes you're left with no other option other than to sell what you know, right? So in our experience, if you can help surface and support the salesperson by recommending products that are going to deliver the most value based on the objectives of their client, right, they're going to want to sell it because it's going to ensure that a customer has a good experience. There's all sorts of data that highlights, the more products the customer buys from you, the higher the likelihood of retention and maximizing spend over the duration of whatever partnership you have with them. So I don't think it's a function. We certainly don't think it's a function of salespeople being motivated purely by commission, right? It's really the intersection of commission and compensation, but also being effective, right, and delivering value for their clients. And that's really what we're focused on. And part of why, salespeople are some of the biggest proponents of using the system, right? We're arming them with information and control to be able to inform those really positive outcomes for their customers.
And it makes perfect sense. I mean, you don't know what you don't know. And even though the sales representative may be familiar with the products that are available, they may not be, connecting all the dots as far as, I know it's available, but what's really the most valuable that's going to pay off long-term for both of us, where it's really a win-win. So that really makes sense. So let's talk about, first of all, how long when did you guys launch and how long you guys been around?
Yeah, so we started the company about 4 years ago. Myself and my co-founders always argue about when our official start date was. I consider it when we hired our first employee because we sort of bootstrapped it for a few months. But the very beginning is about 4 years ago. We're sort of 3.5 in from when we started we had our first employee, and that sort of made it feel real to us.
Yeah.
So
as part of the startup process, you said that you guys kind of bootstrapped it for the first couple months, and we always like to talk about the startup process as not the exact process, but the journey rather of an actual startup. What were some of the most challenging parts of the beginning of that startup process?
Yeah, so I mean, it's funny. This comes up a lot, and you're absolutely right. Right, getting a company off the ground is one of the hardest things. For me personally, it was identifying the right partners, right, the right co-founders. By trade, I'm not a technologist. I'm not a product guy, but we're building software, right? So I really sort of had the kind of commercial side of the business. I felt comfortable in sort of what the market opportunity was, who the ideal customer was, but spent a lot of time trying to identify the right partners. And one of the things about starting a startup is, as you know, is it's hard. And it's not just about finding the right skill set, but it's about finding the right skill set, the right mindset, and frankly, people that have the personal capacity to work for nothing for a long period of time, right? Take on risk and have that desire. So there's a number of people that we've encountered that really have the passion and the desire to want to do a startup, but don't have the life circumstances that allows them to leave their high paying job, because they've got a mortgage and kids and responsibilities, right? So the intersection of all those things was really difficult. Ultimately, we landed in a great spot, and we've got a great founding team that's focused on this. And I think one of the things that we did that was interesting was the three of us really bring together unique skill sets that are complementary. So there's not a ton of overlap, and that allowed us to, in the early days, bootstrap the business pretty effectively, right? So we don't have all the skills required to build a successful and profitable business over the long haul, but we could stand up sort of an alpha and beta product on our own without the need to engage a whole bunch of third party or frankly just expensive resources.
Sure.
So once we got through that, I mean, we certainly weren't over the hump, but it did. Having the right partners did do a lot to kind of help us get off the ground and start that momentum. And once the momentum gets rolling, there's tons of bumps in the roads, but it's certainly easier to keep it moving forward when you have the right team.
Absolutely. So speaking of bumps in the road, you guys launched 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago. We entered a pandemic 2 years ago. What did that all mean as far as the startup, the brand as a whole, what your solution was providing? I was reading the article over on Street Fight before our conversation earlier today. Sure. And I thought the first thought I thought was, whoa, wait a second. Sounds like these guys got their timing of the solution is almost perfect because it's solutions like this that had to be integrated because of remote work and the Great Resignation, all the above. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is underrepresented in successful startups is luck. And we were the benefactors of definitely some timing and some luck. I don't mean to take away from the hard work and efforts of the team, but luck certainly played a role. But not without its challenges. You're right. As a lot of organizations moved very quickly to being truly remote and distributed workforces. And these are companies that historically were the exact opposite culture of that, right? Butts and seats, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. or whatever it was.
Smiling and dialing, yeah.
Exactly right. So, in that environment, a salesperson in the sales organization has infrastructure, right? I can go on a meeting, I can come back, I can go talk to my sales manager, I can go talk to the sales assistants or the support team, right? And I can work in person to kind of quickly and efficiently or reasonably quickly and efficiently pull together some solution for my customer. That went away. Now you're at home, you're sitting in your pajamas, right on your computer, trying to call your boss, trying to call your sales assistant or your sales support person. So, creating and deploying the tools that enabled these folks to have some more control and tackle some of these, functions of the sales process themselves really helped those organizations. And as a result, really accelerated the growth of our business. What I will tell you, despite the fact that was an incredible positive for us, is on the other side, we were supposed to close around the funding on, I think it was March 17th, 2020.
Oh.
We were at really the kind of the 2-yard line. That ultimately sort of disintegrated in the last minute. And that put us in a really interesting predicament because it was a deal that we had worked on for several months. But, in hindsight, like a lot of these deals, they tend to be positive in the end. And looking back, I think that was one of the best things that could have happened. So highs and lows all through a very, interesting time in a commercial environment.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, looks like, it's for the most of it's behind us. I mean, we've still got a lingering, way of the new normal that's here, but it's good to see that I've said that too, that, the world of podcasting was drastically impacted because of the pandemic, and it was a positive. It wasn't a negative solution on there. So there was a lot of good that came out of it based on circumstances. I mean, if you don't focus on the good, what's wrong is always available. So is what is right.
Exactly right. Mindset plays an important role in these challenging environments. And, but I think you're right. I think, the pandemic certainly forced, change in a lot of our professional and personal lives. And, ultimately there's a lot of good that came with it for all of the bad that came with it.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of the good, so what are some of the best parts of the startup phase that have happened that you guys have experienced where you look back and you're like, man, that was awesome, and we didn't even see that coming, and it ended up working out that way?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just having this conversation with one of our investors. The interesting thing is that, when you look back, even in the course of the 4 years that we've been in business, it feels like 10 different companies, right? And sort of reflective of each step of progress that we've made. But B, the number of highs and lows that existed are significant. Now what's happened is that, it used to be one great thing would happen and the highs were high for everybody. And then 2 months later, something terrible would happen. And, we sort of all were on the tumultuous ocean of startup life. Now the volume of good and bad happening at the same time just sort of neutralizes everything, which makes it, significantly more palatable. But, I look back in the very beginning, when we first started the business, myself and my two co-founders, Peter and Jesse, we stood up this product and we were able to sign, a 6-figure SaaS license when it was 3 of us in a borrowed office space in, Soho in New York City. And remember we signed this contract and the 3 of us looked at each other saying, oh my God, how the hell are we going to support this customer? Right. We barely have a product. We barely have a team. But getting that deal played such a significant role because we went from being 3 guys with an idea to 3 guys with a paying customer and a product. And that allowed us to go out and raise money on very favorable terms. And that allowed us to invest in the business and really kind of created the initial ripples that have led to where we are today. So, that stands out as kind of one of the biggest because it was the catalyst for us to convert from, truly a couple of guys with an idea to really an early stage startup. And since then there's been so many enormous wins. I mean, people make a huge impact, right? Our ability to hire, we've got some of the best people in the industry, and the fact that we're able to get them, to come and join us and participate in the journey. Every single employee we have is arguably an enormous win from my perspective. We've been able to get some real significant, and meaningful customer engagements. That plays a role. Now again, sort of momentum's building on each other, and we feel super fortunate to be in the position that we're in.
That's exciting stuff. Well, I'm excited for you, and wishing you guys the best here as you continue plowing away in the world of startup and changing the sales world as we know it with better solutions for sales professionals and for brands to really make sure they're maximizing that sales experience. So wishing you guys the absolute best from here on out. You have to come back to the show sometime and keep us updated as things progress with you guys. But I really enjoyed our conversation. I definitely appreciate our time. Appreciate your time.
Likewise. Yeah, likewise. Thanks very much for the conversation, and look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Thanks again, Quique.
All right, have a great day.
Until next time, friends. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Grit Daily Startup. If you haven't done so already, make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you consume podcasts. This way you'll get updates as new episodes become available. This podcast is brought to you by GritDaily.com, the premier startup news hub. More information at GritDaily.com. Once again, I'm your host, Sebastian Rusk. Until next time, friends.